I consider myself a good person, but I'm going to try to make him cry.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder, and today we'll be playing Blue-White Belcher Control in the Timeless format. So I was tinkering out with some decks recently and realized that like the blue and white MDFC packages actually have a lot of defensive spells. Like Razorgrass Ambush can deal with small creatures, Jwari Disruption can force spike, Sink into Stupor can like bounce things. And maybe realize like what if we built like a Charbelcher deck that was not intending to go fast but intending to go slow, using all these defensive spells. And if there's one thing that control decks like, it's having a win con that occupies very few deck slots. And so Charbelcher is like a one card kill. We play, activate it, the opponent dies. We just need to like warp our mana base a little bit with MDFCs and then we get there. And so because it occupies so few slots, it allows us to load up the deck with a bunch of defensive spells. So mana drains, miscalcs, supreme verdicts, solitudes, all help us play defense until we can stumble across a Charbelcher and win the game. And the type of lands we included here also makes it a very good Chalice of the Void deck. So let's jump into some games. Alright, this is an okay hand. Like, not the best this deck can produce because it doesn't have any of our numerous 2-mana counter spells to hold up. But it can rush out an early Teferi Time Raveler, which is pretty strong in certain matchups. So we'll have to see how it develops. The opponent is going first though. They have Artifact Land into Springleaf Drum. Okay. And there's a pretty big priority pass right here. So what it means is that they probably have some zeros in hand that they're debating playing right now, whether it's Mox Opal or Ornithopter or something like that. And the reason they're thinking about it is they're probably waiting for like a big Pinnacle Emissary turn. You know, they want to get that into play and then play a bunch of zeros. And that's going to be relevant later on. So note that big priority pass. Now, what do we do for our turn? Well, I'm really wanting to play a Teferi Time Raveler here because the shields are down for the opponent, and these like sort of Pinnacle Emissary affinity decks do play some counter spells like Metallic Rebuke and stuff, and so getting a Time Raveler in play will be like pretty big time for us. Not to mention, I'm going to bounce their Springleaf Drum to try and really hit the brakes like on their mana production and stuff like that. So I'm going to bounce the Springleaf Drum. And we happen to draw another white card to pitch to Solitude, because we might be casting Supreme Verdict down the line. So, alright, so the opponent is going to play a Springleaf Drum, and we'll have to see if they have any follow-ups. And note the priority pass once again, they must have some zeros they're thinking about, and they're going to miss the land drop. Those kind of decks don't play that many lands. Then we draw Chalice of the Void, which is an excellent draw. So usually, you know, in the past you'd always Chalice for 1, but there's these affinity decks where you want to Chalice for 0. So I'm going to slam Chalice for 0. We already know they're holding zeros. It's like it's going to really cause them some problems. Now Pinnacle Emissary triggers off cast, so like, but the thing is they won't. Yeah, that's enough for the opponent. So yeah, power of Chalice of the Void. On to the next game. This time we do have some counters. Little light on the lands though. All right, so the opponent mulliganed a few times. Going to play a tapped, play an untapped Witch Enchanter, and then Chrome Mox. And the question is, do we stick a Misdirection under it or a Suppression Ray? Decided to stick a Supreme Verdict and just have like a ton of counters up. I don't want to stick the Suppression Ray because we're going to need to develop our mana, right? So basic Forest, no play from the opponent. Just going to cycle a Miscalc just to keep the cards flowing. All right. Gonna play the Suppression Ray. We want to get mana drain up as soon as we can. There was an argument to bolting and sink into Stupor right there to hold up mana drain. Alright, Forest Pass. And at first I'm like, what the heck's going on? It's like it's some sort of, you know, is it an Elves deck or something like that? Like what is going on with this? But as you know, I have the benefit of hindsight now. Like there's these, if you see red and green mana and no early plays, it's a combo deck. And they're all in on one card. And it's Violent Outburst. And so what it does is it cascades into Tybalt's Trickery, which can then counter the Outburst, and then basically cascade into like an Emrakul, something like that. So it's a 1 Tybalt's Trick Pony, but our deck like is full of counter spells. So we're just gonna mana drain it, and yeah, the opponent's seen enough. So they fold to the interaction. We're on to the next one. So you know, these fragile combo decks, like we're packing tons of counter spells for those kind of things. So. Alright, fetch land, pass. There's always the consideration now to play Chalice in 0 because it stops Mox Opals, it stops Chrome Moxes, stops Mishra's Baubles. It stops our own Chrome Moxes, so you have to take that into account. I'm trying to figure out what to do here. Like, do we slam a blind Chalice for 0 to hope, you know, the thing is, like, they probably would have played a Chrome Mox if they had it. Anyway, so decide just to wait on the Chalice and just play a tap land. Alright, they're going to crack their fetch. Feeling pretty safe against a creature deck. Less good if it's like show and tell. Okay, so feeling way better now seeing the Baragoyf hit the graveyard. Like, okay, it's not an Omnitel deck. It's a mid-range deck, and we're like loaded with Solitudes and Supreme Verdicts and stuff like that. The opponent is on the play though, you know, so they're going to be, you know, ahead of us. Alright, and they are going to grief us right here. So they're going to pitch cast it, and we'll have to see what the opponent has in store. And as the opponent griefs us, I'll go ahead and link a scam deck of my own here. It's an archetype I love to play. I played like a million variants of it. So let's see what they take. Alright, so they're going to take one of our blue sources, like one of our mana options also, so, which is I think pretty strong because it puts us like way further away from Goblin Charbelcher or the One Ring. The opponent just happens to get Thoughtseize bugged right away. They don't know it yet. So I'm thinking they're probably just holding up Bowmasters right here. Like, they could be holding up like a Miscalc or Mana Drain, or sorry, or Mana Leak, I should say. But I'm just going to Chalice for 1 because it tends to be super strong against the black decks. It shuts down Dark Ritual, it shuts down Reanimate, shuts down Thoughtseize, you know, so. Alright, so it is a Bowmasters that they're holding up. Was also wondering, like, they might have Drown on the lock considering they have blue mana, so. Let's see what the opponent has in store. Alright, Strip Mine is pretty annoying because they basically griefed away a land and then popped one with Strip Mine, so that's actually pretty tough. So they're going to crash with Bowmasters, and we have a pretty significant amount of card draw in this deck between One Rings, Teferi Time Raveler, cycling Miscalcs, you know, so going to just Solitude away the Bowmasters and save a little damage. Like, we know we don't want Bowmasters in play, so I'm just going to do it. And also I was maybe hoping to prompt like a counter spell or something from them. Alright, so we are drawing some more lands, which is nice. I'm worried about more Strip Mines, so like I'm thinking about holding on to, because we want more, you know, if they play another Strip Mine, I don't want them to knock out our only blue source. So I'm going to play a white source here and just sort of hold on. That does put us miles behind if we do draw a Mana Drain, you know, so that is a consideration. But we're under like no pressure right now. Maybe the opponent's going to slam like a Baragoyf or something. Alright, Suppression Ray, perfect. We're just ripping lands. It's like, you know, we have One Ring and Charbelcher. We just need to get to 4 mana and then we're doing pretty good. Alright, so let's see what the opponent has. They're fetching basic Swamp and nothing on our end step, so. And I'm really curious, I'm like, what are they, like, are they holding some soft counters? Like, I'm really trying to figure out what they're doing. So, now's the question. Do we go for a One Ring and just feed it into a counter, potentially? Or do we go for Charbelcher, considering if it resolves, blue-black has, like, no answer for, like, a resolved Charbelcher. So, really trying to think, and I decide, you know, I'm just going to go for the Charbelcher. Like, thinking, you know, they could have some soft counters, but these scam decks tend to be way more heavily black based. So Charbelcher resolves, and we got to see if the opponent can do anything about it. Alright, so they're going to draw, think for a second, look at Charbelcher and concede. Alright, so, and that's the power, you know, a lot of decks can't deal with the resolved Charbelcher. You just need to untap with it, and if they can't kill you, then it's game over. So it pairs really well with the control plan, because control decks like concise small package win conditions, you know, because then all the rest of the deck can be interaction. So, all right, we have quite a few things. I end up putting back Sink into Stupor. That's just a mistake. I should have put back a Suppression Ray, because it's nice to have options for like untapped mana, and by doing that I denied us holding up turn 1 Mana Drain, you know. Now I was immediately bailed out, but with a second Chrome Mox, you know, so. But I just want to point out that was a mistake by me putting back Sink into Stupor instead of a second Suppression Ray. So there is a consideration to sticking like a Miscalc under this Chrome Mox, which is what I end up doing because we need to keep hitting land drops. You know, we can't just burn all of our mana sources. Not to mention, we're already on the cusp of casting One Ring. So like if we mana drain basically anything, we're on the One Ring train next turn. You know, so that was the rationale for sticking a Miscalc under it. So Drix Interlacer, I decided just to counter, like it guarantees a One Ring next turn, and it's going to like halt their production. And this is obviously like another Pinnacle Emissary deck that we're facing right now. So they're going to play it, which double Drix Interlacer out would have been insane when they go off with Pinnacle Emissary, because it would have given like a lot of different card draw, and they could have cracked one to then fuel the other and then crack the other, so the opponent's going off right now. And I'll go ahead and link an affinity deck of my own, though it's quite different than these Pinnacle Emissary decks. And then what do you know, we just rip a Goblin Charbelcher. So I'm just going to slam, Charbelcher and just be like, deal with it, because I've faced a lot of these Emissary decks. They have some stack interaction with Metallic Rebukes, but they basically can't deal with like a resolved Charbelcher. So I'm going to let them go off, and as the opponent plays all their stuff, if you enjoy seeing, combo control decks, please Suppression Ray the like button. Alright, so the opponent is drawing a million cards, but I don't know if they even have an answer to it yet. So they concede, we move on with our lives. Chalice and a bunch of counter spells in hand. Alright, so they're going to shock in a Breeding Pool. Would love if we had a Chrome Mox right now. And I'm sensing that it's a Omnitel deck right now, so slamming a Chalice for 0 to stop later Chrome Moxes and stuff from them. But honestly, yeah, like, it's just me fighting for my life right now, going second against what looks like to be a combo deck. But as you could see, like, maybe Chalice for 1 would have been better because it stops brainstorms and stuff. So, alright, they're passing with 2 mana up. Now what do we do? It seems pretty clear to like bolt in the land and hold up mana drain. So we'll have to see what the opponent does about it. Now I'm not certain like how good this matchup is, like the this control Charbelcher build versus the show and tell decks. Like I don't know if it's necessarily a good matchup because it takes us a little while to assemble our combo. We just sort of like hoping to stumble across it with some card draw, whereas they're dedicated to like rushing it out, So I am going to Jwari Disruption the stock up right here. This would have been like an awesome thing to mana drain had we had one of our like juicy artifacts. Note there is some priority passing going on, so there's some sort of free spell that they're holding. And I'm trying to think like what would a show and tell deck have, and like the only thing I can think of is like surgical extraction, So so we have these mana drains, but none of our like artifacts to pour it into. And there's the Chalice. So I decide this is a reasonable opportunity. I'm going to bolt this land in, because our life total doesn't matter in this matchup. And I'm going to make sure the auto tapper doesn't screw us. So going to Chalice for 1, and maybe like bait out a counter spell. The thing is like, if they're running counter spells, it's usually mana drain, which sucks because that's going to give them a little bit of a mana infusion. So I'm feeling reasonable though, because we have our own mana drain. Alright, so the opponent is going to dig through time. I'm like, alright, I'm going to snap off the mana drain right here, just try and slow them down a bit. And the opponent has a Veil of Summer, which is just devastating. So they're going to get a ton of cards and selection. Now the thing is, we are going to get the mana drain mana still. So it's not over yet, and so now it's looking pretty bad. So they're going to show and tell. We're just going to plop a Solitude and play. Maybe we can get an Atraxa if they dump it in, but of course it's an Omniscience. And so I'm like, alright, well, we basically just lose. But then they just pass the turn. And so the annoying thing is, with this infusion of mana, had we ripped a Charbelcher and they didn't have like another mana drain, we might have just won right there, despite the opponent showing, telling, and Omniscience. So that's pretty unfortunate. Like we still have like a tiny bit of fight left in us because we have the mana drain, and considering they didn't just win last turn, so the opponent is going to fire off a stock up. I'm like, well, that's like going to go well towards them winning the game, so I'm just going to try and stop it. But they have Hullbreaker Horror, which is basically going to be good enough. And there's the Surgical that we were suspecting. So this is a pretty nifty play by the opponent. They're going to bounce our mana drain and then Surgical the one in there. And so yeah, we're just getting absolutely wrecked. And Supreme Verdict won't even matter because they can bounce on a stack. So on to the next game. This hand, I honestly don't know if I should have kept it because, yeah, I don't know. We're sort of like flooded with the Charbelchers. Alright, so another Pinnacle Emissary deck. I think this is already the 4th one just in this one video that we've battled against, so it's a very popular deck, so at least in best of 1. So going to Solitude it with the first spell on the stack, like they will get one of the Thopters, but it should like really hit the brakes on them. Like it also didn't get them enough artifacts to go off with the Mox Opal, so that was a very clutch Solitude right there to buy us some time. Alright, so there's Mishra's Bauble, so now their Opal's online, and there's the Thought Cast. Alright, so they're really going off. So what I'm hoping for is to like hit something, hopefully like a Pinnacle Emissary with a Mana Drain, and then feed that into a Charbelcher. But we happen to draw Chalice of the Void, which is like insanely good in this matchup. So I'm going to Chalice for 0, which is just exceptionally strong against these Pinnacle Emissary decks. Like we've already, you know, seen it happen before where they can't really deal with it, and it's really strong against them. So here's Pinnacle Emissary. I'm just going to snap that Mana Drain off. I'm like, alright, I'd love to feed that into a Charbelcher, but there's the Metallic Rebuke. So they are going to get to go off with Emissary, but it used up all their mana. So just going to play a land and hope to just slam a Charbelcher soon. Alright, so there's another Thought Cast. Now they can still generate Thopters off Pinnacle Emissary, but it's going to be hard for them to like keep cards flowing with like Mishra's Baubles and stuff when they're all getting countered. So considering we have double Charbelcher, I'm just going to slam one right here. Like maybe they counter it, but if they don't, like they have like no answers, you know, once it resolves. So they had to have like, you know, double counters to deal with the both of them we have in hand. So it does resolve though. So, and the thing is they need, yeah, and that's enough. So turns out this deck's pretty good at beating up the Pinnacle Emissary deck. So next hand, I don't know if that's a keep with double One Ring. Like we maybe need more mana sources. So I think I have like 24 MDFCs plus 4 Chrome Moxes. So there is an argument to maybe playing a few more mana sources in this deck to make sure you're constantly hitting your 4s for One Rings and Charbelchers, you know. So gonna Chalice for 1 against a red-black deck. It's just bound to be good against them. And the opponent fires off a Faithless Looting, which gets gobbled up by Chalice. So it puts a card type in their graveyard, but they probably actually wanted to use that. So, and yeah, there's the oops. So they must be new to playing against Chalice, which is, you know, everyone has to battle against them sometimes, and it's obviously good against them. They're cycling their Unearth to try and dig for something relevant. So, all right, they do find a land. All right, we find a land, which is clutch. Happy to see that. So this is what I'm saying. Like maybe we need more mana sources in this deck. The other thing I've been thinking about is it would be nice for like some like 2 mana card draws. Like on the turns where we don't counter something, it'd be nice to fire off like maybe like Consult the Star Charts or something like that as a way to sort of just keep things flowing. So now this is unfortunate for the opponent. So they're looking at Chalice, they're looking at their Faithless Looting and thinking that flashing it back is going to get it through the Chalice, you know. And I don't blame them. Like they might be like a little bit newer to Magic and thinking, not really sure on like mana value versus mana spent, you know, because the mechanics that care about that flip-flop all the time, you know. So they attempt to get their Faithless Looting through the Chalice by flashing it back, but that does not work. So we're going to slam at One Ring, and we're starting to pull away. We're just, you know, under basically no danger from them. They don't appear to be the kind of deck that runs counterspells, so we're just trying to find the Charbelcher and just get them with it. So cycling Unearth, we could see this is like some sort of lean like aggro deck, you know. So in fact, I'll go ahead and link, not aggro, but like a Reanimator kind of thing. So I'll go ahead and link a Reanimator deck of my own. It's an archetype that I like to play on occasion, and yeah, the opponent's seen that. Like their hand must be completely locked out by the Chalice. So on to the next game. Double Chrome Mox. It seems reasonably safe to stick a Supreme Verdict under it, considering we have a backup one, and that allows us to hold up Jwari Disruption. So I have to take some damage. Now one vulnerability of this deck has like there's sort of a high number of tapped lands because you have Jwari Disruptions and Suppression Rays and stuff, and when you want to play your untapped lands, you have to take a ton of damage, you know. So there's just something to be conscious of when you're playing this deck, like to not damage yourself too much, especially if you slam a One Ring later on, you know. So there are tricks you can do with like Subtlety to gain a little bit of life, but decide to slam a Teferi right here. There's nothing to bounce, but getting it in play, you know, against a blue deck could be pretty dang strong. So we'll have to see how relevant it is in this matchup. So Teferi's in play. Alright, and then they shock that land in, and they fire off a Demonic Tutor. So it's almost certainly an Omni-Tail deck. And then we happen to draw a Goblin Charbelcher. So we have a decision to make. We can play the One Ring, or play Charbelcher, or play nothing. I'm trying to draw like a counter spell right here off Teferi, but we draw another Charbelcher. And so I'm about to slam the Charbelcher. I'm like, wait a second, like if they fire off a Show and Tell, we could dump a Charbelcher into play and then win immediately. And so I decide to just not cast anything. And maybe this is me being way too fancy, but the thing is, the combo deck had a turn 2 Demonic Tutor, and they're just an A+B combo deck. Like, you know, if they have Show and Tell and they grab the Omniscience with Demonic Tutor, then, you know, if we tap out, we're just sort of dead. And so that was my rationale. But the problem is why are they going to play into open blue mana? You know, so that's like the really tough part. And we draw a Chalice, so which is not super helpful. I'm probably going to play it on 0 here to possibly shut down a Chrome Mox, but I think it was a mistake just not playing anything. I think I should have just slammed the Charbelcher last turn and just hoped that they didn't have it, you know, because it'd be quite reckless for the opponent to run a Show and Tell into open blue mana, you know. So I don't think my other plan was going to work. And like, sure, maybe they had us, but we've just given them more time to set up right here. So, all right, so there's the Brainstorm. Putting some cards back. So our shields are completely down at the moment. And just really hoping they don't have it, but of course they have it. So I'm like, dang it. Okay, so like, you know, maybe they just waited because of the open blue mana last turn, but they're gonna dump an Omniscience into play, and there's Hullbreaker Horror, which is pretty annoying. If they have enough juice in hand, like, they're going to be able to just completely like reset our whole board. So going to draw in response. It does resolve, and there's a Brainstorm, and first order of business is of course to bounce the Charbelcher to protect themselves from that. And so they're going to draw off that. And so yeah, this game, I don't know, like, we might have lost either way. So as the opponent goes through bouncing our entire board, let me know in the comments, what are your favorite cards that have like that completely warp your deck building? Like Charbelcher famously like makes it so you don't really want to play any lands. I like Chalice of the Void that like changes the mana value of the cards you put in your deck, you know. So let me know what cards you like that do that. All right, next game, have a turn 1 Chalice of the Void on X=1, or can hold up counter spells. And I think it's way better in the dark to just hold up the counter spells. So because you don't know what you're playing, like if it's against Show and Tell or against energy, like it's going to change. And here's another Pinnacle Emissary deck. So I fire off the Mana Drain here. I think it would have been better to just miscalc it, because I'm just like, oh yeah, I can get a bunch of mana from it. But the thing is, now that we know it's an Emissary deck, we're going to Chalice for 0 anyway. So don't need the mana, and we don't have one of our artifacts to pour the mana into. So I think it would have been way better to miscalc it and save the Mana Drain. But what I'm going to do is I'm playing this stuff, I'm like, you know what, like, and it turns out that's enough for the opponent. So just chalicing for 0 is just annihilating people all day long. So on to the next game, have another Chalice, can't turn 1 X=1. And the thing is now is, as you could see in this matchup, in this current era of Timeless, like, you're chalicing for 0 like as much or more than you're chalicing for 1, you know. So that's why I run it out for 0 right here, because of just how good it is in the dark on 0, you know. So however, the opponent goes turn 1 Ragavan and makes me regret the Chalice for 0. Like, they still might have some Chrome Moxes, but obviously they have some 1-drops. So what do? I'm gonna play the tap land and pass. Like, we are very close to Charbelcher mana right now. So do we Solitude the Ragavan, or do we just wait till we can sweep stuff up with Supreme Verdict? and decide like Ragavan's powerful enough. Like the fact it generates treasures just seems like way too good. Not to mention like any land, and then we're Charbelching. Though now they have Strip Mine. All right, so rip a Supreme Verdict, which is annoying. It might be good later on, but don't love looking down a Strip Mine and like missing some land drops, you know. So all right, Broadside Bombardiers. I was honestly hoping they just play like a Blood Moon or something like that. Like we don't really care about it. So they're gonna crash in with Broadside and play a Chrome Mox, which gets countered by our Chalice. So it is doing like a little bit of work, and it does add a card type to their graveyard. So, and oh man, it's just like, oh, if only that was an untapped land, because they would be able to slam Charbelcher and almost have like the win guaranteed locked up. They might have artifact, you know, destruction, but opponent's going to Pyrogoyf us and crash with Broadside Bombardiers. So, and then we draw the Charbelch, and so this is the critical turn right here. So I'm basically trying to calculate how much damage can the opponent shell out next turn. Like, and the thing is about Pyrogoyf is that it triggers per like Lurgoyf that enters, and so it's do we Supreme Verdict and buy ourselves some time, but then the opponent might Strip Mine us and set us back, or do we just hope they can't shell out enough damage and slam Charbelcher? And that's where I was agonizing over there. I'm like, oh, which one should I do? I'm like, they're not gonna kill us. Like, but the thing is, like, Broadside Bombardiers represents so much damage, as well as Pyrogoyf. And like, what are the chances they have another Pyrogoyf? Well, turns out they have it, and that is going to, you know, that combined with Lightning Bolt adding a type to there means they have like a surplus of damage. So if we would just use Supreme Verdict, we would have definitely not died that turn. We may not have won though because of Strip Mine, you know. So that was like a really tough one. I think honestly misplayed. I should have just Supreme Verdict there to just buy us some time. So, all right, Ocelot Pride from the opponent with the blue-white land, which like Ocelot Pride's a dangerous creature to leave in play. And so I just, because the fact that they're representing counter spells, potential counter spells with blue mana, I am going to Solitude it here, which I think it's just a mistake to do that. Sure, that card is snowbally, but we had to use a Witch Enchanter to pitch cast the Solitude, which then uses up some of our potential mana sources, you know. So gonna bolt that land into play to hold up mana drain. I want to see what the opponent does. So I'm gonna crack their fetch and play a Sacred Cat, which is I was not expecting, but it indicates that they're possibly on some sort of tribal, like cats, you know, with like a life gain sub theme, you know. So we've seen Sacred Cat and Ocelot Pride, you know. So gonna play the tap land. I'm scared to throw a Chalice into like open blue mana, like even though it obviously is good. All right, so there's the cat theme continues. They're gonna attempt to mana drain the Ajani's Pride Mate, but they have the Spell Pierce. I'm like, oh, that sucks. So now the Pride Mate's growing. Now the thing is, we do have Teferi Time Raveler, and we just drew a Supreme Verdict, so we're feeling okay. So the opponent taps out. We're gonna just bounce the Pride Mate, draw a card. And here's the mana source problem again. Like, we have all these fours, Charbelcher, One Ring, Supreme Verdict. We need to just keep hitting land drops. So, it, like I said, it makes me wonder if we should add like a couple more to this deck. No, I have no idea why they didn't just kill Teferi Time Raveler with the Sacred Cat. Like, the opponent might have misclicked or something, or maybe they need to tap some creatures to, you know. Anyway, but then the thing, yeah, I don't know what's going on, why they left Teferi, but happy to have it still around. Missing land drops right here, and so I'm cycling Miscalc to try and find one, but we do not find one. So I was just trying to get to these fours in hand. So there's an Ocelot Pride, and trying to figure out what to do here. All right, so they are going to take down Teferi Time Raveler, or at least attempt to. So I'm going to pitch cast a Solitude right here, which I think is a mistake. We have the Supreme Verdict in hand, so if we find an untapped source, we just Supreme Verdict their stuff away. It's unlikely, like, you can deal with Supreme Verdict on this stack, but it's unlikely, like, if they're holding up a mana drain, like, they're gonna be disappointed, you know. So I think that was just a pretty poor play. Now it turns out we weren't gonna draw a mana source, at least very soon. So we're just getting beaten down by some creatures. And I think so. We do draw what's it called, a white card to pitch cast to Solitude, and so it's just tough. Like I'm trying to balance. Like, do we play Chalice? Do we play hold up mana drain? But the thing is, the opponent has no incentive to add stuff to the board. Like, they can just keep killing us and growing their Pride Mate with what they have on board, and then they find a Strip Mine. So Strip Mine is very strong in these sort of tempo decks because, you know, you just get a little bit ahead and then you just cause the opponent to start stumbling, you know. So going to attempt to Solitude down the Pride Mate. I'm really hoping they like try and counter this somehow with like a mana drain. That way we can finally boost our mana production. Like, I've really been wanting to get something with the mana drain. Stifle is not ideal. I'm going to attempt to mana drain it. The opponent's going to throw a Snapcaster into play. So that is, and they don't have enough mana to flash anything back. Now what sucks though is that they had just strip mined our third land, and so we're only getting an infusion of 1 mana, and so we can't Charbelcher or One Ring unless we drew an untapped mana source, of course, which we'd be asking too much in this particular game. Had we drew an untapped source, we can bolt in Charbelcher and probably just win, you know. So I'm just going to slam Chalice. I think that was a mistake. I should have used the mana to cycle Miscalc to look for mana source, but the thing is, the opponent had an old-fashioned disenchant, so if we slammed Charbelcher anyway, it was not surviving. So there's a mana source, but the thing is, we're getting attacked for 3 next turn, so we're just dead no matter what, you know, even if we find another source. So this is just an unfortunate one that just, I think, just barely got away from us, and I think with a little bit tighter play might have been able to end a little bit better. But these sort of lean tempo decks that can fight back against our counter spells are going to be tough, and like we just struggled to find mana sources this game. So moving on to the next one. All right, plenty of counter spells and mana sources in this hand. All right, so opponent's going to go basic island and pass. There's there's things they could cast with it. You could see the priority being held right there. So I'm going to play the blue-white tap land and pass back to them. And yeah, see where this goes right here. Now, one thing is, like, as I was like conceiving of this deck and trying to play with, you know, it's honestly winning way more than I expected it to. Like, you could see how many of those Pinnacle Emissary decks we've like slain along the way. All right, so Ironcrag Pyromancer, I've decided just to Jwari Disruption. Now, I think I guess we have some extra mana sources. Like, sometimes you want to miscalculate and use the Jwari Disruption as a land drop, you know. So, but we have extra lands. All right, so the opponent is going to pass. So they appear to have some sort of card drop theme because Ironcrag Pyromancer needs multiple cards drawn to trigger, you know. So I'm going to bolt that land into play to hold up double Miscalc, and I'm not going to just play our artifacts out into open blue mana right here. So there's an Omen of the Sea from the opponent, and so you could see right now like the card draw theme showing up. Now I've actually played I wouldn't call it similar, but I played a Teamer deck recently that was all centered around like Snapcaster. So Snapcaster proper, but also Songcrafter Mage. So I'll go ahead and link that because it's sort of like interesting kind of deck. I decide I got to do something, so I'm going to play Teferi Time Raveler because if they are holding counters and card draw, so we're forcing one out here 3 steps ahead, which is one I play in the Snapcaster deck. I'm going to miscalc 3 steps ahead because Teferi's super strong against decks trying to play at instant speed. So that's going to make our plays a lot safer if Teferi can stick around. So, alright, so we managed to take 1 counter on there. Alright, so then they have Ominous Seas, which is an awesome card from Ikoria that picks up counters, can eventually dump Kraken. So they're going to opt into it. Really think you should be running like Brainstorms if you're trying to go off with Ominous Seas, you know, to get all those card draw triggers. But they do like their top 2 cards with that Surveil right there. So too juicy just to bounce their Ominous Seas right here. It's not very threatening at the moment, but might as well set them back and try and draw a card. So what do we do now? I'm trying to think, like, do we just slam Charbelcher? I said, you know what, like, I'm just going to slam the One Ring right here and just wait, because we almost have, so the magic number to play and activate Goblin Charbelcher is 7, you know, and we're getting exceptionally close. If we play the tapped Jwari Disruption right here, we can just play and activate Charbelcher next turn, you know, under the safety of Teferi if it's still in play. It might just get bolted and then all of a sudden it's not as safe, you know. So there's a Growth Spiral. The opponent's trying to chain off those card draws. And let's see what else they have to play. Alright, they've run out of Lazotep Plating. Reasonable card in Ikoria, War of the Spark limited, but not doing a whole lot right now. So just going to do the play I outlined earlier where we just bolt in the land and we're just going to play and activate Charbelcher, which is like basically completely safe under Teferi Time Raveler. So finally going to activate it, knock them out, and that's it. Well, that was pretty cool. I thought it was an interesting experiment to try a slow Charbelcher deck, and it seemed reasonably strong. I think we beat like 5 Pinnacle Emissary decks, and like, you know, it has some decent play. You know, it's not invulnerable, but honestly, some of those losses were like user error. Like I was just messing up, you know. So I think it's like a pretty strong choice, and like it's definitely not fully optimized. There might be some other things you can include, like you might need a couple more MDFCs, because you could see some of those games where you're getting like mana screwed, especially if someone strip mines us. Like you have a lot of 4s you want to hit, and so I could also see maybe including some number of like Consult the Star charts, or some sort of like 2 mana instant card draw for the turns where you don't counter anything. To have this also has the advantage of helping you find Charbelchers a little sooner, and maybe feed, you know, help you feed mana drain mana to them more consistently, you know. So I was, as far as like the counterspell suite, I was looking at like original counterspell, Dovin's Veto, No More Lies, stuff like that. But honestly, like Miscalc is just sort of perfect for that spot, because it gives you some like early game play and you can cycle it when it's lame, you know. Like obviously you're playing mana drain, but this is sort of the next inclusion that I was reasonably happy with. Teferi Time Raveler seems pretty good. It helps you deal with stuff on the board, draw cards, and like also like shutting down opposing counter spells could be pretty good also. Maybe this is what you cut for more card draw. I'm not certain about that. I was intending to build this as like an artifact heavy deck with like Mox Opals, Mishra's Baubles. Then your defensive spells have to be stuff like Spring Loaded Saw Blades, and I ultimately decided like that's just not really the direction I wanted to go. Like it was inconsistent and not as strong as I think this version is right here. Was going to lean way more into the prison elements with like High Noon, but I don't know if we really need to go that way. I think just stack interaction I think is a stronger path for this kind of deck. So, and I was thinking about Simulacrum Synthesizer as a backup win con, but honestly, like you can just kill them with Solitudes or Witch Enchanters if they Surgical your Charbelchers. You even have a couple of Emeria's Calls to make some Angels, and you can easily win the game with that. So, but yeah, that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.